While streaming and chatting and playing Fallout 76 recently, I get questions when I stream. And one of the questions I get the most, and also a question that was posed in the form of saying, "Hey Mantis, you should make a video about this," was, how would I do the next Fallout? Like, if it was up to me, what would the next Fallout be? You can call it Fallout 5, maybe it's a spinoff, but just in general, what would I do with the next Fallout? So I wanted to give a pretty much unfiltered response to this question, where I'm not going to sit down and write everything out and try to plan the perfect game or anything. I'm really going to brainstorm live in this video what I think would make a good Fallout. Of course, this may spark debate down in the comments, which I welcome, and I am excited to talk to you guys about what you think the next Fallout should be, because it's my favorite topic. I love talking about Fallout. And if we do so in the comments, that's fine too. So we're gonna go here, unscripted, off the top of the dome, freestyling, if you will. What would I do with the next Fallout? One of the first things that I think about is the setting and the environment when it comes to the game. Not really necessarily the story, but the setting and environment. And I would pick the West Coast. I use the term West Coast, but I refer to, yes, the West Coast, but it doesn't have to be on the coastline. I'm just referring to the western side of the United States, returning home to the Fallout series. I think the Pacific Northwest is ideal for a Fallout game, and I've always thought that. Yes, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Seattle, and I live in Washington State, but the reason I'm saying that is there is a little bit of bias there. I do feel like ever since I was a kid, oh man, it'd be so cool to see Fallout take place in my town. I want to play it. I just have always been into levels based off of where I've been and where I'm from and the places that I know. I'm sure a lot of other people are like that as well. But I've heard other people who are not from the area say that the Pacific Northwest would be an excellent place for Fallout as well. Now, if you think of games like Alan Wake, Life is Strange, look at those settings of those games. Now, I realize that Life is Strange is kind of an out there, obscura reference here, and a lot of people may look at the story as kind of like preachy or whatever, but I enjoyed the game. But regardless, the setting is what I'm referring to, that Oregon setting, that Washington setting. If you look at Alan Wake, that takes place probably over around the San Juan Islands, that kind of area, and what you have are islands that are just lush with giant evergreen forests of just these beautiful, amazing, thick evergreen trees. And I think a radioactive forest of that nature, or a nuclear winter in Washington, would be an interesting setting. The mountains in the areas, we have a lot of mountains in the areas, but we also have a giant mountain range that's pretty much splits. I wouldn't say it splits the state in half, but it definitely divides the state. That can hide so many things. And you look at some canceled Fallout projects, like the Fallout MMO and Fallout Extreme, that were set to feature Seattle, having vaults in Rainier, St. Helens, the big mountains holding vaults and secrets inside of them. I always thought that was very interesting. And I also read from what I have seen online about Seattle being mentioned in the Fallout franchise, it was planned to be like Nuclear Winter in Seattle. And I'm not talking about Nuclear Winter like how 76 has a Nuclear Winter Battle Royale mode where a firestorm is encroaching in. I'm talking about actual Nuclear Winter where it's permanently snowing in Seattle and permanently a frozen wasteland because of Nuclear Winter. And that's something that we haven't really seen in the Fallout universe. I'd like to see a biome, even if it doesn't take place in the Pacific Northwest. I'd like to see multiple biomes like we see in games like Red Dead Redemption, like we see even to an extent in Skyrim, where you have an area that's maybe snowy, you have an area that's, it's okay to have different biomes. And 76 does it a bit, but I'd really like to see a Nuclear Winter biome to the north of the map in the next Fallout game. If not most of the map. It would be really cool to experience that, and like I said, the Pacific Northwest would be ideal for this. Moving on to what I think is the next most important thing when it comes to the setting of the game would be the timeline. Where would this take place in the timeline? I think that Bethesda does a great job of telling the story during the timelines that they are trying to tell them in, and in the places that they're trying to tell them in. I wouldn't like the games if I didn't think that. Yes, I think some stories are weaker than others when it comes to the franchise, but overall I enjoy pretty much every game Bethesda's put out, especially in the Fallout franchise. Yes, there's been missteps, but I enjoy the Bethesda games. I honestly do. Regardless, I would set the next Fallout, my ideal next Fallout, be it Fallout 5 or a spinoff, like I said at the beginning, whatever it would be, I would most likely want it to be in between Fallout 1 and 2. And there's a few reasons why I would want it to be between Fallout 1 and 2. Most importantly, for me, if I'm just basing it off of my own opinion and my own view on why I would want to see that, is because I want to see the Enclave develop into what it becomes in Fallout 2. In Fallout 2, they're a superpower. In Fallout 1, they're non-existent. So, I'm sure they exist in the lore, but you don't see them anywhere in the game or anything. So, by the time Fallout 2 hits, they're pretty much, ruling the wasteland with Frank Horrigan. And maybe they're just showing, you see in the intro of Fallout 2, you see perhaps the Enclave showing up in the wasteland when they show up at the vault and they gun down all the vault people. And then you see Frank Horrigan out in the waste during that, it's a scripted encounter, but it's a special encounter kind of, where you see Horrigan mow down. Well, I guess Horrigan doesn't do it. He orders Enclave soldiers to mow down that family, the farmer and his family or whatever, that are out in the middle of the waste. Maybe that is the Enclave just showing up, and that's why they're, kind of piecing all that all together. In fact, I'm sure that's pretty much what's going on there. But I'd like to see what's going on. But like I said, if it's set in the Pacific Northwest, then maybe we don't see as much of that, which I would be okay with, but I'd still like that time frame to be the same, maybe with some overlapping locations down into Oregon, like perhaps Klamath, and you can make a pretty good world map. You can make a pretty big world map onto that, say we don't set it in the Pacific Northwest, the timeline of Fallout 1 and 2, just in that area on the West Coast, of course, and just kind of some overlapping locations, like the hub. The hub is mainly what I would be curious about. I want to see the hub in a Fallout game again, and just kind of see where the hub is at. But even that NCR capital city that gets built from Shady Sands, just having those in the area, and then maybe moving north in the map would be cool. From there, or northeast, northwest, just yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. But with the way Bethesda makes games, is say we're taking it the way Fallout games are now, the locations are much smaller now. Though with 76, they do tend to just kind of move shit around and make it so you can make all these locations, and then that was a little more further away on the map, but we moved it closer so that the game world could encompass these things. And I think that's fun when you take liberties with weird locations and try to place them in areas so you can fit all those locations in there, because it's a game, it's not the real world, and you're just trying to base it off of it. It's not GTA 5 where, or actually a better reference for that would be the first true crime game, where they totally mapped all of LA, and I think that was a trend that they did throughout the true crime games, but that's not something we're dealing with. We're dealing with Fallout, alternate history, alternate future, and these buildings and places could be different. But I would really like to see, in between Fallout 1 and 2, the NCR becoming greater, the Enclave becoming greater, the Brotherhood of Steel becoming greater, because all of these factions were enabled in Fallout 1 as well. So you would see Shady Sands become the NCR capital city. You would see the Brotherhood come into their big role in that side of the wasteland, and maybe partnership with the NCR, like we see the Brotherhood locations throughout the map in Fallout 2. You would see, like I said, the Enclave. You would see reports or rumors or something about that, like that, around the Enclave, things boiling up. You would hear about, maybe you could even see Arroyo growing. Just things like that would be really cool to experience. And if you don't want to include the Vault Dweller from the first Fallout, there's ways not to do that if you are overlapping. But even if you don't overlap those locations, like Arroyo and Vault 13, it's still, it would just be really interesting to me to have a Fallout game take place in those timelines. Though I've kind of touched on this a little bit before, I think for the story, it would be interesting to see a bit about how the factions rose to the place that they're at in Fallout 2. Now, a lot of people these days might have gotten into the Fallout games through Bethesda's games, meaning why would they care about the West Coast of the Fallout universe? They've probably never played the first 2 games, nor have they experienced the story. Maybe they know about it through lore videos. They've watched their favorite YouTubers talk about different lore things with it, with those 2 games, but they've never really played them themselves, so they haven't experienced the story firsthand. And though I don't think there's anything wrong with being a Fallout fan and not having experienced those games, I think that you should have a respect for those games, but if you haven't played them, I still think you can be a Fallout fan. I got into those games because I was a kid and those were out. Like, I was born in '87. And those games came out in at least Fallout 2, when I started playing it, came out in '98. It was just the first one I played because that's what was out. And then when they came out later, I played the other ones. But when you are coming into the series and Fallout 4 is out, and you've never played Fallout before, you're like, oh, I'm going to play a Fallout, and you've heard everybody talk about Fallout 4, and nobody talk about Fallout 2, why the fuck would you play Fallout 2? You go and you look at pictures of Fallout 2, it's isometric top-down, the UI looks dated, people in the reviews say it's hard, everybody says that the learning curve's really, you gotta be fucking like super disciplined to want to do it, all this stuff, when I don't feel that way at all, but that's because I've been playing it since I was a kid. Jumping into it new is probably very daunting, and it's not like games are nowadays, so the learning curve is probably a little bit different because games are different now. Regardless, you're gonna play Fallout 4. You look at the way it looks, you hear the reviews, you see everybody gushing about it, you're going to play Fallout 4. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've seen many comments of people saying that they got into Fallout during that time, ended up playing the first 2 games, loved the first 2 games, maybe they didn't like the first 2 games. Some people say that the first 2 become their favorite, or Fallout 2 becomes their favorite after they played all the Fallout games, but they came in at... I had a comment that said that somebody came in at Fallout Shelter. They played Fallout Shelter. I thought it was one of the most wholesome comments I ever received. I came in at Fallout Shelter, and then I just played all the Fallout games. I thought they were so good, and I was so excited to actually, check out the Wasteland that this little mobile game told me about. And then I played the first 2 games, and I just love Fallout 1 and 2. They're just the best. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting opinion. You don't really hear that from somebody who got in with... But I am digressing so much here. Anyway, the story that I'd like to see is the factions being raised up from Fallout 1 and 2. These are factions that people who play these new games all know and love, and they're some of the things that Bethesda crams into games to sell them. So I know that people have interest in these things. The Brotherhood of Steel, the Enclave, the NCR, even Caesar's Legion. All of these things can be included because all of those things exist on the West Coast. That's where they started. And the fact that they exist on the East Coast is often subject to debate. Bethesda just kind of crams them in. Now, they've oftentimes written at least decently interesting stories on why they're over there, but they all started, according to Fallout lore, on the West Coast. These specific factions, anyway. I'm not saying that there aren't factions like these out in the wastes, but these specific factions started over here. I'd like to see the tribal aspect of that area. The Pacific Northwest is known for its deep Native American heritage, and to be able to see tribals expand from that. Maybe they find a bunch of Native American artifacts, things like that, and they base their tribes off of those old ways of... So we see that same kind of thing in Fallout 2 with Solik. These very primitive, like almost like it's like Native American-esque from history. Like I'm talking back in the day, back at like way 100 years ago, 200 years ago, however fucking like where these tribes of people existed like that. It doesn't exist the same way. These people aren't the same way now, but the tribes back then, you see a lot of that in Fallout 2 and in New Vegas, like the Honest Hearts DLCs, you see these tribals. I'd like to expand on that more with Native American heritage from that area. It's so rich and it's so deep, and you can expand the creatures, you can expand the story and the setting all through their folklore and their legends and their stories, because it's also interesting and deep. There's so many stories and classic movies and classic books are based off of Native American folklore, it would just be great to see even more of that in the Fallout universe, because it's so rich and it's so deep, and I enjoy it so much. So that's another plus for the Pacific Northwest, because of how deep that area is enriched in such things. When it comes to the player character, I think that we should be a vault dweller. I think that we should come from a vault in the area, maybe not one that we've even heard of in lore before, just make a new one, it doesn't even matter. Just coming from a vault, I think, gives that classic Fallout feel. Maybe the vault malfunctions, maybe you're a caravan from the vault and you guys have open communications with the outside world already, so it's not new to you. Though I like the idea of it being new to the character as well as the player when they enter the wasteland. So, though we didn't get that in New Vegas, and New Vegas is one of the best Fallouts of all time, we didn't get that in Fallout 2, and Fallout 2 is one of the best Fallouts of all time as well. So I guess that isn't really a prerequisite for this situation, because two of the best Fallout games has the character already knowing what the wasteland is before the player does. So I guess that doesn't have to be the case. So you could, in my ideal Fallout is what I'm saying, you could have you be a caravan person from the vault, is what I'm saying. Like, the vault makes trades and maybe you get attacked, or you are coming out of the vault for the first time, still works for me as well. Or maybe you're sent out because something broke in the vault, like we see in Fallout 1. Anything like that is fine with me. But I do think you should be a vault dweller. It explains the Pip-Boy immediately. You get that classic vault jumpsuit, and the vaults are such a big part of the Fallout universe. In fact, maybe the main quest could be figuring out what the experiment is in the vault that you're coming from, and something's not right. And then once you complete that main quest, it opens up the actual main quest of the story. Those type of things are the things that keep me invested in Fallout so much. Things like the vault experiments, things like just solving those mysteries, and that would be a more like compelling story, and would want me to play the game more and be more immersed to find out, whoa, like if you gave people a little bit of time, just a little bit of time in the vault doing whatever job it is. Maybe you can pick a few ones. A lot of games have alternate starts where you can pick different paths, which would be great. But I understand Bethesda's way of storytelling. We can still, keep this type of idea with Bethesda's type of storytelling. Maybe even if you want to take Bethesda's type into play, maybe you're locked up in jail in the vault, and then the vault, whatever experiment is going to happen, that's what happens. And like, as you're playing the beginning of the game, it decides what you're in jail for. Kind of like how we saw growing up in the vault in Fallout 3, you just kind of follow your choices to build your character, and that would decide what you were in jail for, much like Van Buren. And then we would, of course, emerge from the jail cell, escape the vault, and try to figure out what the hell just happened. Maybe have to find the regional Vault Tech headquarters. Maybe that's blown up, and now we have to look for other vaults in the area. I think the vaults being the main plot point would drive it further than I need to find my son, I need to find my dad, insert missing family member here. I think trying to figure out why this big corporation has directly affected you before you have even started the game is a much more, as a player, I would get behind that more, like, oh, what is this all about? Why is this company doing this? And of course I know a bit about Fallout lore, and I know my shit when it comes to that stuff. So I would already be privy to it, but you could still speak to these privy fans that are into this shit and already know it, because you can play off of what they're into and change things and do things. And I'm just saying, that would be, to me, a much more engaging story than find missing family member here. And then the wacky, kooky characters and settings that you meet along the way is what tells the story and paints this beautiful picture, because that's what Fallout's all about. So you would, go through your vault life. Maybe it is from when you're a kid, maybe it's just a bad week that your character had or something, but it decides your perks and your character traits. Of course, you'd be able to edit them at the end if you didn't like what happened at the end. But going through something like that, getting locked up in jail based on your choices, and it would tell you a crime based on your character build, which I think would be cool. And Van Buren did something similar to that as well. then something happens in the vault and you have to escape. No one's ever been outside the vault before. That'd be a cool point to mention that then right there. You know, you're in the brig, you break out. What's going on? Everybody's freaking out. Everybody's dying or whatever the hell's going on. I don't know. You know, insert vault experiment here. That's still a work in progress. But then you get out of the vault. You finally get out of there. As you're getting out of there, you know, your Pip-Boy alerts to the fact that, like, there's other vaults in the area and you can look for clues there and shit. And then, you know, there's a town right outside the vault, of course. And that town might be full of some kind of fucking people. And those people are like, hey, you know, why don't you help us too? And then there you go. You got a Fallout game. It writes itself, boys. But that to me is a much more compelling story than, hey, help me find my shit. Help me find my son. Or, oh my god, I need to find my dad. Because it just like, that isn't my dad. That isn't my son. That's the character's son, and that's the character's dad. And though I can appreciate those stories and get immersed in those when I play those games, I would get a lot more immersed in a story that was directly affecting me as a player. Like, oh, that company's fucking with me. And if you made the game fuck with you mentally, or, you know, in any way that you can with a video game, it's very easy to have a game fuck with you, you know, talk shit to you or whatever from Vault-Tec, and it would fuck with you personally, you would be so much more, I think, just so much more immersed, and the plot would go so much more forward, in my opinion, of like, oh, I need to figure out and get to the fucking bottom of this, because who's behind this? Maybe there's a surviving employee of Vault-Tec, you know? It's just shit like that. We need, because if Mr. House can survive in a fucking tube, why can't fucking Billy Vault-Tec, Mr. Billy Vault-Tec? Huh? But you know, yeah, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I just think that kind of overarching antagonist would be great. Of like, oh, Vault-Tec's been fucking with you, and if you go to, you know, the number of vaults in the area, you can find other experiments where they've been fucking with other people too. And they have a headquarters, but it's kind of fucked up or whatever, you know, is happening. And so you have to talk to all these people. But then after you figure out what's going on there, after you figure out your own vault experiment and you get revenge on Billy Vault-Tec or whatever the fuck is going on, it actually opens up the main plot of the game. What's the main plot of the game? I would say it would be more like restoring, or because of the Enclave thing, figuring out this shadow government that's been running these experiments. Fucking Enclave. And then it ties into Fallout 2, the Enclave is fucking here. Bada bing, bada boom, realest guys in the room. I think the VR situations, like we see in Fallout 3 for Operation Anchorage and Tranquility Lane, and in Fallout 4 for like Kellogg's memory sequence and shit like that, those things, oh, and even in New Vegas for the Nellis Air Force Base, even though they don't let you get involved with them, those kind of VR pods, I think those should be for DLCs, like fucking completely. I think, well, and like the main story should have 1 or 2 instances of them as well. They're the best thing in the Fallout universe, and though I do think they could be overused, I don't think that the people who write Fallout use them enough. For Kellogg's dream sequence, I liked it. I thought it was cool, but some people thought it was fucking stupid. You just walk through a thing and watch fucking pictures, and then you get to the end, and it was just like a shitty plot device to tell you all this shit. But I think they could be used for much better shitty plot devices than that. Like, as you take the role of a sci-fi game and a sci-fi movie. Look at, for example, New Vegas when it came to Old World Blues. It embraced the old world Hollywood B-movie with like sci-fi B-movie with the video game and with New Vegas. And I think that using the plot device of these VR pods, you can visit places and locations that you wouldn't be able to just in your timeline, and it would be awesome to do. The Resource Wars, the Great War, even though it's just a boom flash, there could be another instance of it, like you could go to a museum or whatever lets you experience the Great War, but from a different perspective. That just sounds fucking stupid right now, but it makes sense in my head. But the Resource Wars would be a really good DLC where you I'll kind of taken off of what Operation Anchorage did, but putting you in a VR pod where you fight the Resource Wars as United States Army or whatever, and go through some of the stuff that happened in the Resource Wars that led to the Great War, and then boom, there's the Great War with the nuclear explosion. That would be really fantastic, and a DLC that I would love to see, and I think a lot of other people have been interested in that as well. And a lot of other people, that I've talked to have been incredibly interested in a Fallout taking place in another country. Now, while I wouldn't have a problem with that personally at all, it's not my ideal situation because I like the Americana vibe that Fallout puts into its games. Without that Americana like essence over the game, it kind of doesn't feel like Fallout. But I think as a DLC, another country would work amazingly. Fallout China comes to mind immediately, and Annexed Canada. I think a Fallout Annexed Canada DLC would be muy bueno. You go, especially with the area that we're talking about the Pacific Northwest already. If you could go up into Vancouver, maybe Victoria Island, it would be absolutely wonderful to see what the hell's going on with Canada post-war. We haven't really seen much of it besides a little bit of an intro video in Fallout 1, which hardly counts as actual like experience with Canada, and I really want to I want to see it. I want to see what's going on up there. And since my ideal Fallout's already taking place in the area, like I said, we're already at the border. We can already move up. We can already check out that area. Those are just a few of the ideas that I would have for the next Fallout. Like I said, whether it be Fallout 5 or a spinoff, a lot of people would like to see the series move forward and not do a prequel for the next Fallout if it was Fallout 5. So even if it was something like a spinoff, that would be ideal for me. I think it would be a great story. I'd be very immersed in it, and I would have a super good time. But of course, I'm picking everything. But what about you? Like I said at the beginning, I'm very interested to hear what other people's ideas for the next Fallout would be. Like, what would you do in the places that I did? Do you agree with what I had to say? Do you not agree with it? What the hell's going on? I'm not just getting I get plenty of comments, so it's not I'm trying to get you to comment on the video. I absolutely want to talk to people about this. I will be replying to the comments. I'm going to look through them. I'm going to read them all. I'm going to check them. And I really want to talk about this because I think it's a really interesting topic for anybody who's a fan of Fallout. And I love hearing other people's ideas. Much like I'm very into seeing other people's ideas of hell and heaven, like heaven and hell. Like I like hearing what their interpretation of that is. I've explained this on stream before as well. And this is another situation like that. I just like hearing other people's interpretation of things of this nature when it comes to, I want to say fictional places, but I don't want to be disrespectful because I just said heaven and hell before, and some people may say that those are real. But what I'm saying is like fictional places with when it comes to like Fallout games and when it comes to like Elder Scrolls games. I love hearing people's perspective on those things. So that's my agenda there. I'd like to talk to you guys about it because it's interesting. So you could either do that or you can come into the Discord if maybe you're already a member in there, but we can use the Fallout channels to talk about this. Maybe the Maltese Falcon would probably work the best because it's Fallout General. So I want to chat about this. I'll even be chatting in there about it because it's just interesting to me. I've said that plenty of times. So let's move on to thanking my lovely Patreonoids and YouTube channel members. These are people that pledge $5 or more to the YouTube channel through Patreon or as a YouTube channel member. And they are Hoppin' Soda, Nathaniel, Skylar Masterson, Sorry Boy, Squiggles420, SS1234L, Edgy McGee, and Trevor Morris. And on the YouTube side of things, we have James Meador, Corbin King, Kyle S., This Old Planeswalker, Triumph, Mark05790, Mark Train, James Starkey, Craniac Gaming, Skull and Suit, Sean Johnson, Coffee is Good, Samson Incorporated, Server Lols, Kim Jong-un, and Cadenza. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the Tag Team Champions of the World. These are people that pledge $5 or more on both Patreon and as YouTube channel members. And I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you guys for all this support. We have Fireflare, Nero, Jay of the Jungle, Clay395, Bob Hunt, Lisbeth, TKs-Gimper, Combat Carl, Jake Russell, Mark Jordan, and Just55. Thank you guys so much. Like, seriously, it is fucking unbelievable. I'm stuttering. It's so unbelievable to me because I just am moved when it comes to you guys supporting me like that. You allow me to be able to do this as a job right now, and I appreciate you greatly. And I can keep making content the way I'm doing it now. So, win-win, I hope. Anyways, I love you guys. I hope to see you in the next one. It has been Mantis.
I gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon' touch the sky. You gon' touch the sky, baby girl. Testify. Come Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon'